A scream tore through the farmhouse, sharp and jagged, making the night itself recoil. It wasn't just fear, it was the kind of terror soaked in blood and pain, desperate to escape that strangled mid-breath. The old wooden walls shuddered as the cry echoed, bouncing like a trapped animal searching for a way out. Then came silence, thick and unnatural, where even the crickets dared not speak. A faint thud began, rhythmic, dragging across rotting boards. Each sound grew heavier, closer, until it pressed against the edges of sanity. The air reeked of rust and iron, the metallic tang burning in the throat. Cold fingers of wind slid through broken windows, wrapping around the skin like a warning. From the blackened doorway, beyond shattered glass and peeling paint, a voice crept out. It rasped with intention, cracking as though dragged from the grave itself. The whisper carried no warmth, only hunger. It spoke your name. Emily sat bolt upright in her bed, her tiny fists clutching at damp sheets. Her chest heaved as the last echo of that scream faded in her ears. She whispered, "Mom," but the house gave no reply. Sarah stirred in the next room, half asleep, unaware of her daughter's trembling. Emily pressed her back against the headboard, scanning the dark corners of her room as shadows seemed to stretch too far. The air was colder now, each breath leaving faint vapor like winter frost. She thought she heard the dragging sound again, far away, but inside the walls, slow and deliberate. Her eyes widened, too terrified to blink. When she finally dared look toward the cracked window, the curtains fluttered though the air was still. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Something had followed her home. Morning brought no relief. Sarah poured coffee in the kitchen, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Emily sat silently at the table, her cereal untouched, hands shaking as she traced circles in the milk with her spoon. "I dreamed about Mr. Grayson again," Emily whispered. Sarah froze, mug halfway to her lips. Mr. Grayson had died 2 months ago, yet Emily spoke of him often, always with fear. "Honey, it was just a dream," Sarah said softly. But her voice carried doubt. Emily's eyes darted toward the dark hallway, and her lips quivered. "He said he misses me," she whispered, "and he'll be back tonight." Sarah's grip on her mug tightened until the porcelain creaked. That night, Sarah sat on the edge of Emily's bed, stroking her daughter's hair. Emily clung to her arm, eyes wide with terror. "He'll come," Emily whispered. Sarah forced a smile. "It's only a dream. Nothing can hurt you." But her heart raced, her nerves straining at every creak of the old house. The wind rattled the window, and both flinched. Sarah leaned down and kissed Emily's forehead. "Sleep, my love," she said, though her voice quivered. She stayed until Emily's breathing grew slow and steady, then tiptoed out. The hallway was colder than before, shadows stretching unnaturally long across the floorboards. Sarah dared not look back as she shut the door. Sarah awoke with a start, the clock glowing 3:17 a.m. The silence pressed on her chest like a weight. Then she heard it, the dragging sound, faint but steady, from Emily's room. Panic surged. She rushed to the door, her bare feet cold on the wooden floor. Emily's door was ajar. Sarah pushed it open, heart pounding. Emily slept soundly, but the sound didn't stop. It came from under the bed. Sarah crouched slowly, dread curling in her stomach. The shadows beneath the bed were thick, deeper than they should be. Her breath caught as she leaned closer, and a whisper slithered out. It spoke her name. Emily's eyes fluttered as sleep dragged her into darkness again. The classroom appeared, broken desks lined like gravestones. Mr. Grayson stood at the front, pale and silent, his lips curled in a twisted smile. His voice seeped into her mind, smooth yet suffocating. "You didn't forget me, did you?" he asked, his eyes glimmering like whetstone. Emily whispered, "Why are you here?" But her voice was swallowed by the air. He stepped closer, his footsteps echoing far too loudly for the dream. She felt her body shrink against her chair, unable to move, unable to breathe. The air thickened, every shadow in the room stretching toward her like grasping fingers. He leaned close, his breath cold on her ear. "Tonight, you'll stay with me." Emily awoke with a gasp, clutching her arms. Moonlight spilled across her bed, and Sarah rushed in, alarmed by the sound. Emily's sleeve slid up, revealing fresh scratches along her skin, red and raw as though clawed by something unseen. Sarah whispered, "How did this happen?" Emily shook her head violently, tears spilling. "He touched me," she cried, her voice breaking. Sarah froze, her chest tightening, the sight burrowing fear deep into her bones. The marks were too real, too jagged to be explained away. The room felt colder than ever, as though something lingered still. Sarah pulled her daughter into her arms, but her gaze flicked nervously to the shadows pooling beneath the bed. Morning light filled the kitchen, but no warmth came with it. Sarah examined Emily's arms again, though the scratches already seemed fainter, as if mocking her. She muttered, "It doesn't make sense," while Emily sat silently, spoon untouched in her cereal. Sarah forced herself to smile and said, "It's probably just from your nails, honey." But the lie tasted bitter. Emily shook her head, whispering, "It was him." Sarah's eyes drifted to the window, where the glass trembled faintly though the air was still. She swallowed her fear, choosing silence. Yet deep inside, the fragile rationalizations she clung to were already breaking apart. Detective Harris leaned back in his chair, the thin folder of Mr. Grayson's death open before him. His sharp eyes scanned the autopsy notes, but his frown deepened. Heart failure, they had ruled, but the details were murky. He tapped his pen against the desk, muttering, "Doesn't add up." His office smelled of coffee and dust, the walls lined with fading case files. When Sarah knocked hesitantly, he looked up, his skepticism clear. She explained Emily's dreams and the scratches, her voice trembling. Harris shook his head. "Nightmares, stress, that's all," he said firmly, though his eyes lingered too long on the photographs of the farmhouse found near Grayson's belongings. Night pressed heavily against the house, each shadow thicker than it should be. Emily lay awake, her small frame curled under the blanket, eyes fixed on the ceiling. The whispers began softly, like wind through the cracks, but soon sharpened into distinct words. Her name, spoken again and again, drawn out in a hoarse rasp. She buried her head under the covers, but the voice seeped through the fabric, closer, angrier. The closet door creaked open slowly, though no draft stirred. Emily whimpered, clutching her pillow tight. Her heart thudded, the whispers now circling her bed, pressing in from every direction, until silence fell again. Only the faint sound of breathing remained, not her own. Emily sat cross-legged on her bed, her voice trembling as she described her latest dream to Sarah. "He made me sit in his classroom," she whispered, eyes fixed on her hands. The desks were broken, and he stood in front, smiling. Sarah rubbed her daughter's shoulder, her throat dry. Emily's voice lowered, almost inaudible. "He said the bell would never ring again." Sarah felt a cold shiver climb her spine. Emily's face was pale, her lips trembling. She pressed her palms against her ears, as if to shut out sounds that still lingered. Sarah tried to steady her breathing, but unease pressed harder with each word. The room felt suffocating, as though invisible eyes watched them from the corners. The next day Sarah drove into town, hoping for distraction, but instead met Jonah, a drifter leaning against the wall of a gas station. His eyes were tired, his clothes ragged, yet his voice carried weight. "That house you live near," he said, "isn't safe." Sarah stiffened, gripping her bag tighter. Jonah's stare didn't waver. Grayson was always drawn to children. That place fed him. Sarah's lips parted in shock. "How do you know this?" Jonah smiled bitterly. "Because I've seen him before, and I survived." His words clung to her like ice. She realized she couldn't dismiss Emily's terror as mere nightmares any longer. Something older and darker was weaving itself around them. Later that evening, Emily sat in the yard with her classmate Lily, her small voice shaking. "He comes in my dreams," Emily admitted, staring at the grass. Lily's face went pale. "Me too," she whispered, hugging her knees. "He said he'd take me away." Emily's breath caught as tears welled in her eyes. The two girls exchanged a look, terror uniting them in silence. Sarah watched from the porch, her stomach twisting, realizing this was no isolated torment. It was spreading. The thought gnawed at her mind. How many children had Grayson whispered to before? The question hung like a storm cloud above them. Sarah retreated to her bedroom, tears streaming as she pressed her palms against her face. Fear and guilt tangled inside her, crushing her chest. She thought of Emily's pale face, Lily's frightened eyes, and Jonah's warning. She whispered to herself, "What if he's still here?" The silence answered, thick and merciless. Sarah opened her eyes to see her reflection in the mirror. For a moment, she swore another face hovered behind hers, faint and fleeting. Her body froze, her breath caught in her throat. She shut her eyes tight and whispered, "I can't let him take her." That night, the house groaned with unnatural weight. Emily's toys slid across the floor without touch, books fell from shelves, and doors slammed shut. Sarah rushed into Emily's room as the lamp flickered violently. Emily cried, "He's here!" The air grew suffocating, pressing against their lungs. The sound of footsteps thundered upstairs, though no one was there. Sarah grabbed Emily's hand, her own shaking, pulling her close. A framed photo crashed from the wall, glass shattering like a scream. Sarah whispered, "Hold on to me," though her own heart pounded with terror. They weren't alone anymore. Detective Harris sat hunched over a stack of reports, his jaw tight. The file on Mr. Grayson was thin, yet the words carried rot. Rumors of misconduct, whispers from parents, accusations swept under the rug. Harris tapped his pen against the table, the sound sharp and deliberate. He muttered, "Why was this buried?" The fluorescent light above flickered, buzzing like a trapped insect. His chest grew heavy as he studied a photo of the farmhouse found among Grayson's belongings. The corners of the paper curled as though scorched. Harris clenched his jaw, realizing he was looking at the roots of something that should never have been forgotten. Sarah sat across from Claire in a quiet cafe, her coffee untouched. "You knew," Sarah accused, her voice shaking. Claire avoided her eyes, fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "I didn't want to believe it," Claire whispered. Sarah slammed her palm against the table, the sound making Claire flinch. "You should have told me," Sarah cried, her voice breaking. Claire's lips quivered as tears welled, guilt etching deep lines in her face. The hum of the cafe faded into silence between them, the weight of betrayal thick as stone. Sarah's heart twisted, fury and sorrow colliding in her chest. That night, Sarah awoke to soft footsteps echoing in the hallway. She rushed to Emily's room and found her daughter standing rigid, eyes closed, her face pale in moonlight. "Emily," Sarah whispered, shaking her gently, but Emily didn't stir. Her small body turned toward the door and began walking slowly, as if pulled by invisible strings. Sarah's pulse hammered as she followed, her feet cold against the floorboards. Emily's lips parted, murmuring a name. "Mr. Grayson," she whispered in a dreamlike tone. Sarah clutched her daughter's arm, desperate to break the trance, but Emily pulled forward with unnatural strength. In the attic, Sarah uncovered a small trunk hidden beneath moth-eaten blankets. Dust rose as she opened it, revealing a leather-bound journal. Its pages crackled with age, filled with Grayson's scrawled handwriting. Words spoke of rituals, whispered prayers, and the farmhouse as a place of offering. Sarah's stomach lurched as she read entries describing children, their names etched in spidery ink. Emily's name was among them, circled in black. Her trembling hands dropped the book, its pages fanning like wings. The attic grew colder, shadows gathering in corners as though the words had summoned something awake. Sarah staggered back into Emily's room, clutching the journal, her breath ragged. Suddenly, the air grew sharp and cold, the lamp flickered violently, and the mirror on the wall cracked. A dark figure materialized, tall and gaunt, its hollow eyes fixed on her. The entity's voice slithered across the room. "You shouldn't have read it." Sarah shielded Emily, who screamed from her bed. The walls groaned, the wood bending as if the house itself rebelled. Sarah shouted, "Leave us!" But the figure only stepped closer, its form flickering between shadow and flesh. The journal burned hot in her hands, pages curling with unseen fire. The line between waking and dreaming collapsed for Emily. She stared at her bedroom wall, but shadows writhed as if alive, crawling upward in jagged shapes. Sarah clutched her daughter close, whispering prayers, her hands trembling. The ceiling bulged, plaster cracking, as if unseen hands pressed from the other side. Emily screamed, "He's here even when I'm awake." Sarah's throat tightened as her rational world dissolved. The lamp flickered until it burst, glass spraying across the floor. Darkness swallowed the room, leaving only the sound of Emily's rapid breathing and Sarah's pounding heart. Something in the shadows moved closer. Jonah sat across from Sarah in the dim glow of her kitchen, his hands trembling as he lit a cigarette. "I saw him years ago," he said, smoke curling like ghosts around his words. His eyes were dark, broken. "He took my sister. She never came back." Sarah's chest tightened, her hand gripping Emily's shoulder. Jonah leaned closer, whispering, "You can't fight him like a man. He's tethered to that farmhouse." Sarah's voice cracked. "How do I stop him?" Jonah's lips pressed into a grim line. "You don't, you survive." His words fell heavy, sealing the truth she dreaded. Sarah knelt beside Emily's bed, clutching a rosary in one hand, her knuckles white. She whispered prayers, her lips trembling. Candles flickered around the room, their flames bending as if against a current. Emily's eyes darted, wide with fear. "He's watching!" she cried, clutching her blanket. The air thickened, pressing down on them. The rosary burned hot in Sarah's hand, her skin blistering as she refused to let go. The closet door creaked, a shadow stretching across the floor like spilled ink. Sarah's voice cracked as she cried, "You can't have her." But the room answered with silence and cold. The house shook as Mr. Grayson's voice filled the walls, deep and echoing. Objects rattled violently, books flying from shelves, lights flickering in violent bursts. A mirror shattered, shards scattering across the floor like teeth. Sarah shielded Emily as the air bent, the voice twisting through every crack. "You cannot keep her from me." The sound pressed against their skulls, unbearable. A picture frame lifted from the wall and hurled across the room, smashing beside Emily's head. Sarah screamed, "Leave her!" but her words vanished under the roar. For the first time she saw him fully, his figure forming in the shadows, his grin monstrous. Detective Harris burst into the house, his flashlight slicing through the chaos. He froze, his rational mind shattering as he saw the shadowy figure looming. Emily screamed, reaching for him, "Help!" The house moaned like a living thing, floorboards cracking under invisible weight. Harris fired his gun, the sound deafening, but the bullets vanished into blackness. Grayson's figure only laughed, the sound rattling every window. Harris's hands shook, sweat pouring down his face. His voice cracked as he whispered, "God help us, it's real." Sarah clutched Emily tighter, her eyes meeting Harris's, both of them consumed by terror. The farmhouse loomed in the distance, its silhouette jagged against the stormy sky. Sarah gripped Emily's hand, her knuckles white, while Harris led the way with his flashlight. Jonah trailed behind, his face grim, muttering words that sounded like prayers. The wind howled through the trees, rattling branches like bones. The farmhouse door creaked open as though expecting them, its darkness swallowing the light that touched it. Emily whispered, "He's waiting." Sarah's breath caught, fear clawing at her chest. Harris raised his gun, his voice low. "This ends tonight." But the house groaned in reply, alive with anticipation. Inside the farmhouse, the air was suffocating. Dust swirled in the beam of Harris's flashlight, and the wooden floor groaned with every step. Emily's small hand slipped from Sarah's grasp as she wandered forward, her eyes vacant. Sarah cried out, reaching for her, but Emily's voice rang in the stillness, flat and distant. "He wants me upstairs." Jonah hissed, "Don't let her go." Harris swung his light toward the staircase, but shadows stretched unnaturally long, curling like serpents. Sarah's pulse thundered as Emily's bare feet touched the first step. Sarah's heart seized as Emily disappeared at the top of the stairs, her figure swallowed by darkness. "No!" Sarah screamed, rushing after her. Harris followed, gun raised, his breath sharp. The hallway above stretched longer than it should, doorways yawning like open mouths. Emily stood at the far end, her body still, her head turning slowly toward them. "He says I belong to him," she murmured, her voice carrying the weight of something not her own. Sarah stumbled forward, tears blurring her vision. "You're mine, Emily, not his," she cried. The hallway groaned, wood splintering beneath unseen weight. Sarah stumbled into a room at the end of the hall, her breath ragged. The walls were covered in symbols, scrolled in black circles of ash, staining the floor. In the center lay a broken altar, its wood charred, candles melted into grotesque shapes. Harris's flashlight shook in his hand, revealing bones scattered like offerings. Sarah clutched Emily, pulling her close, but Emily's eyes remained fixed on the altar. Jonah whispered, "He tried a ritual here and it failed." Sarah's voice trembled. "Failed?" Jonah nodded grimly. "That's why he lingers." The room shivered as the air thickened, something forming in the corner. The shadows twisted together, solidifying into Mr. Grayson's form. His gaunt face leered at them, his hollow eyes burning with hunger. "You stole her from me," he growled, voice vibrating the walls. Sarah stepped in front of Emily, her voice breaking but fierce. "You will not take her." Harris fired his gun, each shot thundering, but the bullets vanished into smoke. Grayson's laugh cracked through the air like thunder. Jonah shoved Sarah aside, shouting, "Run!" The entity lunged, its shadowed arms stretching across the room. Sarah clutched Emily tighter, her body trembling as the farmhouse shook violently, dust raining from the ceiling. The farmhouse fell into silence, the storm outside fading into a heavy stillness. Dust drifted slowly in the fractured air, settling like ash. Sarah clutched Emily in her arms, her body trembling from exhaustion. Harris leaned against the wall, his face pale, sweat dripping down his temples. Jonah sat slumped near the broken altar, breathing raggedly, his eyes glassy. Emily stirred, her small voice weak. "Is he gone?" she asked. Sarah pressed her lips to her daughter's forehead. "Yes," she whispered, though her heart pounded with doubt. The house creaked in reply, as though mocking her fragile promise. Back at their home, Sarah tucked Emily into bed, the room glowing softly under the nightlight. The quiet seemed almost too complete. Emily curled beneath her blanket, her small hands gripping the edge tightly. Sarah brushed her hair from her face and whispered, "You're safe now." Emily nodded, but her eyes stayed open, staring into the corner of the room. Sarah followed her gaze, finding nothing but shadows. She forced a smile, kissed her daughter's forehead, and turned off the lamp. As she closed the door, the silence pressed like a weight, heavier than before. Days passed, but unease lingered. Emily grew quiet, her once bright eyes dull. She sat in the living room, her doll limp in her lap, staring blankly. Sarah watched from the doorway, dread curling in her stomach. "Sweetheart, do you want to play outside?" she asked gently. Emily didn't respond at first, then turned slowly, her lips parting in a faint smile that felt unfamiliar. "I like it better here," she said softly. Sarah's heart sank at the strange tone in her daughter's voice, too calm, too measured. She forced a laugh but felt her skin crawl. Something was wrong. That night, Sarah helped Emily change into her pajamas. As she lifted the sleeve, her breath caught. A faint black mark, like a twisted symbol, stained the skin near Emily's shoulder. Emily pulled away quickly, tugging down her sleeve, her eyes flashing with something unchildlike. Sarah whispered, "What is that?" Emily's lips curled into a smile too sharp for her face. "It means he's still with me," she said softly. Sarah staggered back, her heart pounding. Emily climbed into bed calmly, lying down as if nothing was wrong, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. The house lay quiet, every creak and sigh amplified in the dark. Sarah sat awake in her room, staring at the ceiling, her heart unable to rest. From the hallway came the faintest sound, a whisper, low and hoarse, calling her name. Her blood ran cold. She rose slowly, each step toward Emily's room heavier than the last. The door was ajar, pale moonlight spilling inside. Sarah pushed it open and froze. Emily sat upright in bed, her eyes dark, her lips parting. In Mr. Grayson's voice, cold and deliberate, she whispered, "Hello again?"